Hi all, I'm Dan Smegrod, founder of the We Get Around Network Forum. Today is Thursday, May 27th, 2021, and you're watching WGAN-TV live at 5. We have an awesome show for you today. Tips for creating Matterport digital twins of schools, of super large spaces. And we have an awesome guest on our show today to talk about that. Hey, Mark McBride, how are you?
Good, Dan. Thank you. How are you?
Awesome. Thanks for being on the show today. Mark is the sales director of 3D Showcase based in Belfast, Ireland. And Mark's company, 3D Showcase, recently shot 50 plus schools. So what better subject matter expert to talk about the problems and challenges of doing Matterport digital twins, doing Matterport 3D showcases of schools than Mark McBride. Mark, before we kind of jump into the problems and challenges that kind of leads us to tips for Matterport service providers, when did your company first buy a Matterport Pro camera and why?
We first bought it our first camera was bought in February 2016, and it came about as my brother-in-law, who is the other director in the business, was a photographer for local estate agents, and he was being asked more and more for virtual tours by all his different agents, and he said that he didn't know a lot about it. He was too busy to get involved, so we decided to set up a separate company, and he had sent me a link to a 360 camera. I have no idea which one it was, but I did a bit of research and came across Matterport, and at the time they didn't ship them to the UK, so we got shipped to a friend in Washington who then forwarded it on to us, and we got started pretty much straight away, which was great because he obviously had a lead. We had an in straight away with these estate agents, and we just went about starting to promote it to them and getting a few houses, mostly houses at the start. So yeah, that's how we got started.
Terrific. You started with houses. What kind of other categories is 3D Showcase providing Matterport tours and other services?
I think I've covered pretty much every category that can be covered, from dentists as well. Dentists always stick out in my mind, but we do commercial properties, big warehouses. We do that, and we do those with both the Matterport and the BLK 360. We do commercial offices, and more recently we've had quite a big surge in hotels, spas. I've done what you call them, lockups for like storage facilities, for self-storage facilities. Obviously schools have been big in the last year for us because of the COVID lockdown. So it's sort of moved and flowed through the years, and we still do residential homes, and which tend to be show homes, or I think they call them open houses over there, but yeah, for developers or big multi-million pound homes rather than the normal regular house. I don't know what the market is like everywhere else, but at the moment here it's very hot, and they're selling off market before they even come to market, some of them, there's not a big demand right now for us in the residential market, but we've sort of diversified, and we decided we do a lot more commercial at the moment.
Terrific. And how many Matterport cameras do you have?
We have 3. We bought the original was the Matterport Pro 1, and then we sold it and bought a Pro 2, which is fantastic, and it's still working away. We had then bought a second Pro 2, and we bought the Pro Lite, which was just as a backup camera. But then we soon realized that, which we didn't realize before we bought it, which was a bit of an error, was that the Matterport charged double for the processing fees of a Matterport Pro Lite. So we then then we won this contract, so we bought a third Pro 2, and the Pro Lite we used as well. So we actually went on the road to do the 51 schools with the 3 cameras, one as a backup in case we had any failures along the way. but we did use all three pretty much every day.
Awesome. And before we jump into the schools, in addition to Matterport, what other services does 3D Showcase offer?
Well, to the 3D Showcase clients, we offer single page websites for large properties. We also, and included in those single page websites, we would use 360 tours, aerial 360 tours, which I'll show you. We in large school sites, they come in very handy if you're trying to show the outdoor pitches or different buildings within a school. So that's pretty much what we do. We do on the other side of the business. We offer virtual furniture, but we tend to stick to the still images. So we use the images actually off of Matterport and virtually furnish them for estate agents as well, for show homes and developers.
Okay, awesome. And again, today's topic, tips for creating Matterport digital twins of schools. I think even before we kind of jump into problems and challenges that you experienced doing 50 plus schools, why do schools want Matterport digital twins, and how do they use them?
Yeah, there's several uses for them. I mean, there's one obvious use, and that was, open days whenever they want to show kids and their parents who are interested in joining the school or looking around the school. Over the last 2 years with COVID, they haven't been allowed to allow the public into the schools. So we saw a gap in the market at that point, early on in the middle of sort of April last year. So we created a tour of one of our kids' schools for free for the school, just so we could get a tour, and then we give them that to use it for free. And then we used that to promote it on the web via Facebook to other schools and headmasters and principals. So they use it obviously for open days. The 51 schools that we did were a group of schools which were for autistic kids. So these kids, sometimes it's a completely new environment, a school building. So they're using it to allow kids who have decided, or their parents have decided, okay, you're going to this school. They can then walk around the corridors. They can familiarize themselves with the space. They can find their own classroom where they're going to be. And as you'll see in a couple of them, what we've hooked up with a local media company who go in after we've created the tour. They go into the schools and interview the teachers from each classroom, and then we embed a YouTube video into each classroom, so they can walk into a classroom and click on and see a video of their teacher introducing themselves, telling them what goes on in the classroom and so on. Then with this group of schools, they use it for it's sort of more like an estate. If they're based in a central location and they're managing more than one school, during meetings like this on Zoom or whatever, they can share the tour and walk around it and say, okay, this is this section of the school, we're going to renovate this section, or this is what's going to happen here. So they can always use it to refer back to. And on that subject, one of the schools has already started to use it for maintenance. So if they need work done on the school, they use the Deeplink on the keyboards. I showed them all how they could use the letter U on the keyboards. They can literally take a shot of a thing, send it to a contractor and say, it could be anything from a light bulb being out to a toilet door being off or whatever. And they hit U, send it and say, this is where you're going in the school. So I thought that was quite a good use. And then again, obviously there's the VR goggles, which add the immersive effect for kids, especially if they want to feel like they're in the school.
Mm-hmm. For that maintenance or renovation, have you found that you've been using a Matterport Matter Pack to provide a data file so that a CAD model could be created?
We haven't been asked for one for school, but we have for other buildings like houses and commercial properties that we've done, but not for a school as yet. But they are aware that they can get them if they want. And it's similar with the Google Street View, where they can publish the Street View. They all plan to do it, but we're just sort of waiting till they get the editing finished before we start to list them all for them.
Okay, great. Are there any other use cases? Maybe they got that in this case where one client bought more than 50 plus tours. Did they get the tour and then went, oh, we could also use this for insurance documentation for
I'm nobody, not with this group of schools. They haven't said anything, but I know that they were talking about it with it was with financing. So if they own the schools, so that if they were going to say, if you go for a bank, if they were going to go for a loan to do work or to do this or whatever, they can literally, what we did was we created a single page website using WP3D, which means that they can go to one page and all their schools are on one page, so they can literally go
WP3D WP3D models, WordPress plugin,
yes,
a Swiss Army knife for Matterport tours for single property websites and a ton of other things.
yeah. So if you can see on here, I'll take you to the page we created, which was so this is the created with WP3D, and it has all the tours. So these are a list of all the schools. So the company that we created for has a single point of access, rather than them having to go through emails to find links for all their schools. So they can literally click in. These are all passworded at the moment for privacy as they edit them, but it just gives them a single point of access. And if they are going maybe to get extra financing from a company or bank or a financial institution, they can say, look, have a look, here's all our schools, have a walk around, you can see what we do, you know. So it's
if you would take us to your website, 3dshowcase.co.uk. On your 3D Showcase website, I believe there's a link to get to that page. You take us maybe under Showcase.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then down to Outcome First. So this way, anyone who's looking for those 50 plus schools, if you come to 3dshowcase.co.uk, you can get to that list. I think, Mark, you mentioned it's so new, those tours have all been password protected. Why is that?
So one of the big issues one of the things that you come across with schools is that all schools are full of pictures of the children. So there's a privacy issue, and a lot of parents have said or stipulated they don't want their children's faces in any form of marketing or school marketing. So if they're in school and they're getting a school photo taken, or if there's someone in with a video camera, they can make sure the kid isn't involved. Whereas when we're in, they have to check. We have to make sure that their kids' pictures aren't in any of our tours. And obviously with the Zoom facility, that's, you know, it can be, even the smallest picture can be viewed.
Well, I just would have assumed you would have scanned the schools when there was no one there. Did you actually?
No, that's what we did. We scanned the schools always completely empty. It's more that in the classrooms, they'll have pictures of their children up on the wall, and they'll have drawn pictures, or there'll be pictures of them on school trips, or there'll be pictures of them that are stuck to the wall on board.
Take us back to a tour. If you would, please share your screen again. Take us so we can visualize what that is. So you did do your Matterport 3D Showcase tours when the schools were closed. But that said, on the classroom walls, for example.
Yeah, so if I take you to one of these schools, let's see, St. Allen's, let's go here, because there are, I know that there's so this is a school that we did prior to the group of 50. We've probably done about 75 schools in total in the last 8 months.
That's awesome. What a great reason to go volunteer to do at least one school in your market at no charge, so that you can have
So here's a good example here on the walls. Okay, so we've got pictures of children. Okay, can you see that? Okay.
Yes. So did you need to use the Matterport blur tool?
So with this school was done before the blur tool existed. So what we had to do was, in our school preparation notes to all the schools, was we had to say to them, we need you to take down any pictures that of any children that you don't want in our tour, because right now we cannot edit it after it's so this was done. I think the blur tool only went really live in the last 3 months. So
yeah.
So this school, we have a sheet which we send out to all the schools, which is a school preparation sheet at the top. So this one is basically says, once we've captured, cannot be manipulated like Photoshop. Therefore, we ask you to prepare your school as if it's a real open night. But the bottom one here, any photographs of children not to be in the tour to be removed. So we send that out.
Excuse me, for clarification, open night is like an open house.
Yes. So in the UK, most schools normally around Christmas time will invite any children and their parents who are thinking about joining the school to come and have a look around. And on those evenings, they're open evenings. They have the classrooms, the art room will have all the artwork of the kids who've done it. The gymnasium will have all the gym equipment set out. There'll be stuff set up in every room to sell the school to the parents and their children. So what we do is ask these schools to pretend that it's their open night and set up the school the way, before we arrive, the way they would have on a normal open night pre-COVID. So for example, in here, you'll see that this gym is set up as if it's ready to go, all the different equipment. So they're showcasing everything that they've got in the within this room.
Now, Mark, when you and your team are doing Matterport 3D showcases like this, are the schools all staged the moment you walk in, or is there a representative of the school with you at all times to make sure that what was supposed to have been staged ahead of time was?
A bit of both. With the individual schools that we did pre to the large contract, we send out, we say, look, I talk to them in detail on the phone and also send them the PDF, and I say, okay, we know we have to do it when the school's empty. So that's going to be on a Saturday, especially in the winter, a Saturday or a Sunday. We could do evenings, but in the summer, but it tends to be Saturday or Sunday, or during school closing times, which could be a half-term break, or midterm, as you call it, midterm break. It could be summer, Easter.
I'm just imagining that you wanted to scan during the day so that you had the nice sunlight pouring in from outside, and it probably showed better.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, here's another example. This is all staged that you see here. So what I had to say to the head teacher is, what I need you to do is talk to the teachers who are responsible for every classroom. Ask them before they leave on Friday, after the kids have gone, tidy up their classroom, lay out on the desks any work, any artwork, anything that will make the room more interesting, because these classrooms can be pretty boring if there's not something for the viewer to look at. It's just rows and rows of tables and chairs in every single room, except for what's on the walls, obviously. So they stage them, and then a representative of the school meets us that morning, and they go ahead of us. And what we ask them to do is, which is probably a question you were going to ask anyway, is how do we know where we're going and which rooms to go into and which rooms are not?
Mark, how do you know where you're going and which rooms to go into next?
Yeah, so that was a big obstacle at the start. We're like, because you don't want them following you around, because like everybody else who has a Matterport, that no matter what you tell them, they still walk into the shot every time. And so it's like, we literally just say, please leave us alone. Just go to the front, have a coffee, leave if you want, lock us in. So I've been locked in lots of schools on my own. But yeah, so we ask them to go ahead. We bring lots of doorstops, and we ask them to have doorstops as well. And we say, please prop open every door that you want us to go in and scan. If the door isn't open, we will not go in. And that was in our contract with the 51 schools. So if the door isn't open, we don't go in. And it works well because you can go ahead of yourself and you see where you're going because the doors are propped open.
So that said, did you end up going back to some schools to scan some rooms that the doors weren't propped open for you?
Right now, no, but we are going to have to revisit a few of the schools because there was construction work also going on. We did them all during the Easter holidays just past, or a lot of them. And a lot of the schools we went to were using the same time to renovate classrooms, to repaint, so they closed the doors and kept them closed because there was building working on. So we will have to go back and add the spaces, but
not because somebody left the door closed by accident.
No.
And have you ever had a problem where the classroom was not staged when you got to the school?
Oh, yes. Quite a lot. Because of this, I keep referring back to this 51 because it's so fresh in my mind, and it is, it was such a challenge to fit them into 17 days between two of us. I mean, there was some days we're scanning 2, sometimes 3 schools, depending on the size of them and the location. But yes, what happened, the memo didn't get to the right person, I suppose, to prepare the school. So what we did was we did our best. If the cleaners had all been in when the schools had closed for Easter, but the cleaners hadn't maybe put the desks back down, they maybe hadn't put the chairs back in place, and stuff was moved out. So we were literally going ahead ourselves and trying to make as good, a setup as possible.
So the tip I'm hearing here is manage expectations forward with your client.
Yes.
Do your best to tell your client how important it is to communicate to their entire team. They may run into things like construction, how that might be handled.
Yeah.
But you still, when you price your job, you got to anticipate that you're not going to be able to perhaps scan at your normal anticipated rate, because you may be sitting there waiting for that school administrator or teacher to be staging the space just before you get to that classroom, and they may not be ready yet for you. Did that run into that where you were literally waiting for them to finish the next room before you could go scan it?
Yeah, well, we had in the contract as well that if the space wasn't ready, that we wouldn't be held responsible for the end product of the tour. But also in there was that if we had to revisit and it wasn't scannable on that day and revisit the space, then there would be a charge for that. The difference with this project was, and most of the viewers will probably only ever be doing 1 or maybe 2 schools in a day or a week, whereas we had a schedule to stick to and we needed to get them all done within a 17-day period. So we were in a position where we just have to get this done today. So, and they were aware of that. So there are a few there's back 2 that we will have to go back to because they're not happy with them because they weren't ready, but they will be charged again for us going back. So as long as you're quite clear in your contract that you're not responsible for the preparation, they are, then that's the way it is.
Yeah. So, but still anticipate that. And you may even in your quote say, here's our return fee for a reshoot because it wasn't ready. There was construction, whatever the problem was. Happy to come back. We just charged for that. Were the 50 plus, was that during a holiday period that you knew the schools were going to be empty, and so that was your finite window?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Could you do most of the schools in one day?
Yes, there was one school took us a whole day. Let me just show you if I can find it. So,
And what is a whole day? Is that 8 hours, 12 hours?
oh, yeah, well, we would have started at 9 and finished at 5. So this is the UK mainland, and all the little cameras are schools. So these are all the schools we scan. So at the top, you've got Dundee and Edinburgh, in Scotland, and then right to the very bottom of England, we have Devon. So each one of these, we had this on a map. You can see there's a little spanner on one there that we didn't get done. That was it was closed for construction. So we had strangely in England, the opening times of these schools, or the closing times to the holidays, was earlier. It started earlier than these ones down here. So we were able to start and sort of work our way down. We came from Belfast, we got the ferry over, and when we sort of zigzagged our way around, and then headed back up and picked up the ones that we didn't pick up there on the way back home. So yeah, and with these ones down here, all the way down here, it's not a long way in terms of the USA or something, but it's a long way in terms of England. We got other Matterport service providers to help us with these ones. There was another guy did this one, and then up here at the top.
Now
So
I'm confused, Mark. When I look at that map, I see Belfast, Ireland, all the way over to the mainland of
over here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're an island set to the left of the UK. So this is Scotland, England, Wales over here, and then Ireland with Northern Ireland at the top. And I am in there, Belfast.
Yep. So there. How did you end up doing the tour for this client?
Well, I think it was probably fine when we first got into schools. When we first started scanning schools, we did one of our children's schools for free, just to get a school done, which they were delighted with. They made their own YouTube videos, the teachers did, and embedded them so that we had some added content. And then I did a promoted ad on Facebook, which I targeted headmasters, principals, ICT, IT teachers at schools all over the UK. So we basically did a targeted advert. As well as that, we call ourselves 3D Showcase, and it's quite a strong, easily remembered name with Matterport, and all the first Matterport tours had 3D Showcase on them. So we do get a lot of hits through Google, and when people are looking for 3D Showcase. So we were contacted by the CEO of the group of schools, which I didn't realize was a group of schools. I thought it was one school when I first quoted. And then they sent through a spreadsheet and said, can you give me a price to do 51 schools? And by the way, I need them done by the end of next month.
So that's awesome. I think I've heard about 3 tips there. One, excuse me, be strategic about either your name or the words that you use on your website. So you were very strategic, having started with Matterport. I want to say 2016. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I know I got my Matterport camera in 2014. So this is still pretty early on. The keyword you saw was 3D Showcase. And so one, that was helping you a lot with Google searches, as people were probably looking for 3D Showcase where they were located. Second, your targeted Facebook campaign. Third, you actually had a Matterport tour that was of a school that was tricked out, including the video, and that was a tour that you did at no charge of one of the kids in your family.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. You mentioned the video and a tour. Could you take us to one of your schools where you can show us an example of a teacher introducing themselves in their classroom?
Yeah, let's see. So this one, hopefully I can find them. They should be embedded in tags. So this one, there's tags everywhere here.
Yeah, my impression was when I flew in, the first thing I saw almost was I couldn't resist. Yeah, the principal welcome. Yeah.
Hopefully this loads. My internet speed isn't as great as it should be.
Yeah. So if it doesn't load, I think what that still shows, I mean, I think between we're using for everything we do to do WGAN-TV live at 5 with you today, plus share screen, plus trying to call up a tour, we can appreciate that we're affecting your ability to show off some of the digital assets.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Bradeside Integrated Primary School. My name is Julie McCauley and I'm Principal of Bradeside. You're very welcome to our virtual tour, where I hope you will get a flavour of our school. Bradeside is the only integrated primary school in Ballymena, and as such it is steeped in the ethos of integration.
Yeah.
Parental.
So
I love that. That's, you you probably haven't looked at this tour in a while, but what struck me was when you open this Matterport tour, that was really the first Mattertag that you saw. It was likely that you were going to click on it, and it was the welcome message from the principal of the school, who I guess essentially, if it's a private school, almost to some extent, it's the revenue generation of, I guess, you got to fill up your school with students that are paying to go to school. Is that how that works in Ireland, or no? Well, I got that.
This particular school was an education authority school, but they are quite competitive in the more numbers they have in, the more funding they get from the government. So they need to fill their positions every year. So they do spend a lot of time and effort and money on their open days to attract new visitors. So these videos were made by a local media company, whereas if we go to
so when I'm looking at that tour, what I'm thinking, okay, COVID comes along and all of a sudden the schools are at a disadvantage of not having an open house where they can recruit students and parents to buy in to attend that school. So money is a motivator to if you're a Matterport service provider, certainly talking to private schools about helping either increase admissions or get cash, sooner, or whatever that revenue model is. I'm sorry, you wanted to show us something there.
No. This is, again, it's the same idea, only this time the school made the YouTube videos. The last one you saw with Julie McCauley was made by a local media company, which we had teamed up with to offer a package. Whereas here, the teachers created, the IT teacher went round the school one day with her phone or whatever it was she used and created YouTube video and then uploaded them to the school YouTube channel. And this was one.
Hello, my name is Mrs. Pamela McKenna and I'm principal here in Upgraded Primary School.
So that it can be done by professionals, it can be done by a teacher, or I
love that. I think many Matterport service providers do actually offer video. I hear that the 3D Showcase is not presently offering it in-house, but you'll partner with another photography agency to provide that. But certainly as a Matterport service provider that offers video, it's an opportunity to offer an add-on to say, and if there's two ways we can do video, either you can have someone in your media lab go talk to the teachers, or you can engage us. Here's how we charge for adding video.
Yeah.
Mark, it's at some point you had mentioned the privacy of students, but we hadn't really talked about it for this 50 plus schools. Are you using the Matterport blur tool in Matterport Workshop, or have you enabled your clients to blur?
Okay, with the sheer number of them, it was never included in the price that we would do the tags or the blur. So what we did was we created, and again with the number of different schools, we couldn't create a collaborator login for every school because that would be 51 collaborators. So what we did was we created an admin, we called it admin and school editor, and we give them both access to all 51 schools. So we put every school into a folder, or some schools had maybe 3-4 scans because they had maybe 3 different buildings on a site. So we give them access, and then what's happening right now as we speak is that every school has been sent out the one login as a school editor, and they've been given until the middle of June to go in and blur any faces out, and also to add tags. And how I did that was I sat one night in front of the computer and I created tutorial videos using screen record, and I recorded myself adding tags to one of the schools, how they added the title, how they added the main block of the text, how they could add a link, how they could add links to external PDFs, images, and then I showed them how to use the blur tool as well and how to publish the changes. And then
if you were to do it over, would you offer as an add-on Mattertags and come up with some price for that? Or do you like the fact that the schools are doing the tags themselves?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't change what I did, because the thing about Mattertags is that only the schools themselves know what they want to highlight within a school. And for some of these schools were small, 5,000 square feet, some of them were 30,000 square feet. And for us to try and find the right spot to place that tag for that information, and for them to try and relay that information to us, would be such a slow process. It really would be very hard to price. So it's much easier to give them access. They like to be able to go in and tag what they want, and highlight what they want. We are here to assist in that they can come to us and say, for example, we found out this week that the blur tool is working on one spot. So if I'm standing on a scan point at the entrance to the door, and there's a notice board ahead with a picture, they scan there. If you move to another spot, it's still visible. So they're having to blur the picture from every spot around it. But then tonight, actually, I had to disable dollhouse view in 2 schools, because even though they were blurring the pictures out in the tour, if you go into dollhouse view and then zoom back into that classroom, you could still see the picture. So we have now turned off dollhouse view on a few schools as well, because they were very sensitive pictures. But no, I think I would advise against trying to do the tags. Don't get me wrong, I do tags for other clients in show homes and or in office blocks where there's maybe 15, 20 tags, but when you've got that amount of schools and the amount of tags that they want to add, it's a minefield.
So cool. I think what I also heard is you empowered them to use the blur tool.
Yeah.
So they're responsible. Is there, in addition to Mattertags and blur tool, are there other things that the teachers or administrators are doing themselves?
Yeah, so the teachers have only received 2 videos. The teachers, the principals of each school, they've received access to the tour to do blurring and tags. Whereas the principal or the administrators who are overlooking and the marketing team for the schools who are marketing the schools got access. They're changing details if I've got names wrong. They're also adding in contact details, because I didn't have exactly the right contact details. So they're putting in the contact details, the website addresses into the details section. A few of them, I did a quick video tonight because they wanted to remove some external 360s that we have done and that they didn't want included. And rather than them coming back and forward to me, if I send them one video and it takes me 4 or 5 minutes to do, then it's much easier to let them do it. What else is possible on there?
Privacy. So I think even though your 50 tours plus tours show up under your link on a single property website page, yeah, they're still private. In fact, maybe you could just take us through so we could see that. We'll get to a screen that says password.
Yeah. So bear with me. I get this up.
Yep.
So public spaces. So this is all the schools here. Yeah. So what happened was,
again, we're at 3dshowcase.co.uk, and then we went to the tab for showcase, and selected outcome first, which is this group of 50 plus schools that you recently completed. So what I was interested in seeing is clicking through at least one of them where we get to the screen that says enter password. And I believe that the school is actually responsible for taking it off password
that's right.
required.
Yeah. So this is the password screen. So what we did was we created the same password for all 50 schools, and they provided me with that password, so they can provide the school with the password so they can see how the final tour looks. But whenever the school has finished editing and adding their tags and so on, then they can remove the password, which means that it can go out to the world, I suppose. So they can do that. Not all the schools are going to get it done at the same time. So they've got control of that as well.
Okay. And then I was confused on the email address or the login for My Matterport for the schools. Did you create one login and then it moves from school to school to school, and they each had?
No, we put all the 51 schools into one folder called Outcome First, and in that Outcome First folder, there's 51 folders, and in each one of those folders, there is a school. So when you will log in as an editor for the school, all the schools have the same login. So there only is actually one login, and you can have as many logged in at the same time, editing different tours at the same time with the one collaborator login.
So that's good to know. One collaborator account can be opened simultaneously by multiple. So you didn't need to create 50 plus logins, just one login.
Yeah. The one concern that the reason why the schools have been given until the middle of June, they've been given 6 weeks to go in, access their tour, add their tags, blur their faces, and then at that point, the administrators are going to ask me to change the password and take back control of them, just in case any of the teachers or any of whoever has access there's a fallout with the school, or they are disgruntled or leave the company, because in theory they could go in there and delete all 51 tours because they have a collaborator login. So,
well, there should be a collaborator status that says you can't delete it's been a while since I looked at collaborator, but I want to say that there's a level that wouldn't let them delete it. They could just edit the tour. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, you might be right. You might be right, but it was more that they would have access to other schools as well, and they could just be silly, I suppose. Whereas if we just give them temporary access to do what they need to do, then
okay. So that might be just that for a Matterport service provider, a decision to say, hey, are we going to provide one email address or one account or multiple? Me personally, going forward over time, rather than asking a client to create a collaborator account, which is a somewhat cumbersome process, we just do it. So we have, guest one at WeGetAround.network.com, guest two, and then we provide an ID to our collaborator, a login, and then when they're done, we just change the password, recycle it, use it with the next client.
That's a great idea.
And I think just between you and me, by having our email address and not our clients, it just means Matterport sends a marketing email about buying a camera or Matterport capture services or whatever else. The email's going to me, it's not going to my client.
So you get 30 emails every month as well. All the same.
Yeah, that's a whole nother show. So take us back, if you would, to one of the schools. Show us the other kinds of tags that you've done. I think we've seen two kinds of tags. First is I think of as the principal of the school, if that's the correct term in UK.
So this one's a very interesting one, Dan, because this is an Irish speaking school.
Yeah.
So I had to add tags, but when I say Irish speaking, it's all Irish. So if you have a look, can you see the language there?
I can't see your screen yet. If you could share your screen.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Let me go. Yeah, let's see, share.
Okay.
So this school is called Culture Fiesta, which is Irish, and all the tags are in Irish language. Sportland. So I had to learn how to use Google Translate to start with to get the links right. And I can, if I click on this link,
Well,
it's actually
Mark, you should have just called me. I've been watching Outlanders on Netflix, and like I could have done this no problem.
Yeah, so that link that link that I clicked on was actually a link to a separate building. So I put it said something like click here to visit Sportland.
So that's interesting. You had some campuses that had more than one building.
Yeah, so going back to this particular one is there is one big building and then this pretty impressive sports complex for a school. I was very impressed. It had a big, large gym down here.
Wow. I'm going back to school.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
It was pretty impressive. This room was a challenge because I only had a Matterport with me that day. We had
Meaning you probably would have preferred to use a BLK 360 on that particular
absolutely
large space. Did you have challenges here where Matterport was confused about where to put the scans?
Yeah. What I tend to do is in situations like this is stick to the wall, get myself around the outside of the room. So you'll find that there's not so many. It's when you go out into these open spaces is where you start to lose your alignment. So I'm sticking quite closely to anything that I might be able to.
So did you hide scans?
Not in this one, but if I actually, let's have I want to show you where, in this room, you'll only see there'll only be a few in the middle, and I was very, very lucky. In fact, I probably, if I go to Dollhouse, did I use?
I mean, I've tried doing a basketball court and I failed. I couldn't put the camera. I tried.
Tell you why I did this one. I used Cortex conversion, so I put the camera, say for example, here in the middle of let's go right to the very middle spot.
So I shot a 360.
60. Yeah, I shot a 360 and then placed it on the map and then I converted it.
So let me see if I'm going to go slow on this. So Matterport Pro 2 3D camera creates two types of shots. One is a 360 view. The other is a 360 scan. We're typically in 360 scan mode, creating a 3D tour. But if I heard you correctly, in this particular case, use on your iPad, set the shot to be a 3D view. Then you manually placed the 3D view where it was supposed to be, and then said, turn that 3D view into a three-dimensional image using Matterport Cortex.
Yeah, that's correct.
Did I get that? Am I close?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So it comes in handy in big open spaces. This one was particularly easy because you've got lines on the ground, so you know where you're placing when you're in the capture app, you know where you're placing your 360.
Let me clarify here, Mark, because I started to say I tried shooting a basketball court and I failed. I could not succeed no matter what I did in terms of moving the camera or a few feet instead of many feet, lower camera, nothing. So it sounds like that's already a problem that you've actually experienced yourself or similar. And rather than trying to even do Matterport scans of a space like this where it's so confusing for a Matterport scan, you decided not even to do that. You just approached it as we described with 360 views converted to 3D scans.
Yeah, Absolutely. And I've done that I did that in a warehouse, an empty warehouse with nothing in it, with 20,000 square feet. And I used Cortex conversion for about 14 shots and it came out fabulous.
That's like golden. That is such an, unbelievable tip. You even knew you were going to have problems scanning that gymnasium, that you had a workaround for that. That was really awesome.
So I just wanted to show you another tip. This is a long corridor. There was a scan here, there was a scan here, there's a scan here. And there was probably between here and the tag, there was probably 15 scans. But if you see when I click the mouse, there's 1 click, 2 clicks, 3. So I've deleted every other scan, or if not every 3rd scan. So I'm when you're in schools and you've got long corridors and there's nothing on the wall, especially when there's nothing on the walls, there's some of the new schools that I've done, actually, these are quite close together. I've scanned, I've literally hidden scans from one end of the corridor to the other. So when you click it, it's like going into hyper speed. It just whizzes you from right down to the other.
Did you shoot those all as Matterport 3D scans?
Yeah, they were all shot as 3D scans. The reason I've hidden them is if I left them all there, we would be click, click, click to try and get along corridors. If you look at the dollhouse view of this, look at this corridor here. So they want me to get this. This was a huge school, but it had 6 geography classrooms, 6 history classrooms, 6 science classrooms, and they didn't see a point in me scanning 6 of everything because they were all pretty much the same. So what we did was, for example, there's one corridor up here in the top floor, I think it is. Yeah, so you can see how far I'm moving there. I'm moving 4 or 5 scans at a time just to get to the science lab. Once I'm in the science lab, I use all my scans. But when I go back out into the corridor, to save time and for the end user, whenever they're moving along, it's much quicker for them to move around the school when they're not clicking.
Yeah. So the tip there is when you have a corridor like that, you need to shoot every 5 or 10 feet, whatever that is in meters. It just so that the scans will actually connect. But to make it really a walkable tour experience, you need to hide scans in Matterport Workshop. Did you empower your teachers, administrators to hide scans too, or no? That's something you've done.
We did as a request by them, but it was more because a couple of our schools, we did rooms. We were told to do rooms that they ultimately decided they didn't want in. So we've shown them how to hide scans to stop people walking into those rooms in the final tour. But when it comes to the corridors and so on, we did a lot of that ourselves.
Is that where they keep the lunch money or something, and they didn't want you decided not to go in?
Maybe, but this was.
I don't see any outdoor scans there.
No, we didn't. Well,
were there schools that you did outdoors?
This particular. Okay, so this school here, I'll show you here. So this is it from the outside, and this is us using 360.tours software.
Okay.
This is the sports building that we were in earlier with the big basketball court, and this is the main school. Now, even though you see 1, 2, 3, 7 you 3D tour links, there's only actually 2 3D models. So we use Deeplinks. So if you click on that one, it'll drop you into that part of the building.
So again, the platform you're using here is 360 Tours.
Yeah.
THREET 360.
SIXTY.tours.
I should get this right. I feel bad that I'm gonna.
It's
not-
THREESIXTY.tours.
Tours. Thank you. Which has been a member of the We Get Around Network forum community forever. I'm just used to clicking on the button to go there. But if you could go back out, yeah, right there. Hold that for a second, because you actually did use a 360 photo here, or a 2D photo.
So no, this is a 360 panorama from a drone, which was provided by the school. We asked them, could they get us a 360 panorama? We could have provided it, but at the time they had a drone pilot as a parent who was able to shoot it for us and supply us with it. And then because the pitches it's a huge place. We're so far away from the school, linking them didn't give the feel of the size of the place. So we decided to embed the 360s.
Okay, awesome. So I just want to point out with 360.tours, you can use either a 360 photo as that hero image or a 2D photo.
Yeah.
So if you just have a 2D shot, that will work too. So this is awesome, because this really gives you an overview of how massive this campus is.
Yeah. And using the deep links as well.
I guess you'd call them pitches. I'd call them maybe a soccer field. You'd probably call it football or something. But
yeah, we've got Gaelic football here, and then soccer over here, and then we've got basketball, outdoor basketball, and I think there's another Irish game of camogie, I think it's called.
Okay.
But
can you click on one of your deep links where it says 3D tour?
Yeah. So these 4 deep links are all part of one tour, and these 3 deep links are all part of another tour. So if I click on this one, it'll load us into the.
So this is a really important tip, because if you're not familiar with creating a deep link, it's rather easy, and it means you can go to a very specific spot within the Matterport tour. And so I think what 3D Showcase has done here is really awesome, because you were able to use one tour, but have it look like that you have 4 different places that you can land within that tour. So you can take them to that exact spot where that 3D tour icon is pointing to.
Yeah. I did leave the these things. This text that you're seeing here is actually the names of the different things. I'm not sure why they're coming up on the screen, but I wanted to show you something while I was in here. Oh yeah, it was the stairs. These stairwells in schools, there's lots of them, and this is a stairwell here, in here. What we do is we do one set of stairs to get us from floor 1 to floor 2, or floor 2 to floor 3, but the end user doesn't want to spend, in a house it's fine because there's 1 flight, maybe 2 flights of stairs. The end user doesn't want to spend their time walking up and down boring staircases. So what we do is, although it's in Irish, it says something to the effect of click here to go to the first floor.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, so it teleports you to the first floor, again using deep links. So you're within the same tour, so it's almost instant. You're on the top floor.
That's awesome. Maybe we can come out of that particular tour so we can clean up that screen. So when we were looking at the 360 view of the entire campus, I saw 2 kinds of icons. One was that said 3D tour. What was the other one too?
They were for external 360s. So we did 360s in the middle of the soccer pitch.
Could you take us to one of those? And did you shoot the 360s using your Matterport Pro 2 3D camera?
Yes. I'll take you to a different one because
okay, it's fine. So these were 360 views. So when you shot outside, did you have any place where you needed how to say this? When you shot outside of schools, did you always do 360 views rather than 3D scans?
So if you've got more than one building, we did try to link buildings together using 3D, walking the camera around schools, and I'll show you a few examples. But when buildings are if you go to a campus, for example, the 51 schools that we created tours for, there's 81 models for 51 schools. There's 83 models actually. So some build, as you can, this is another example, sorry, of our, I'll just go back to this and then I'll talk to you about the schools. So this is where we've got the tours. This is a movie studio, a film studio in Belfast. But if you click here, it's the same as the thing. When you click, it's ground 360s. This is what we took these 360s using the Matterport, but similar to the schools, similar to the schools that we use external 360s. So
Okay.
in schools they vary, and it really depends on the weather. It depends on the layout of the school. If you've got a walkway, a covered walkway, lots of school buildings are connected by covered walkways because they've got children constantly walking between buildings during the day. So we find that Matterport can handle it pretty well. You can actually walk your camera and get alignment. It can be a trick sometimes, but whereas if there's no covered walkway and the sun's shining, then you're really, unless you take the time to get the BLK 360, or if you've got facility of that, which we didn't because we needed to get them done so quickly, we ended up creating just individual models for each part of the school and then linking them with links.
So anytime you needed an outdoor shot, you did a Matterport 360 view.
That's correct.
I may have misspoken earlier, but there are two kinds of content that can be shot, either a 3D view or a 360, a 3D scan or a 360 view. You were doing 360 views outside, rather than 3D scans. So I'm going to say that the short tip is, if you're an expert at shooting Matterport, there is a technique of how you can shoot outdoors to do Matterport tours, but it can be tedious and it can be frightening if you really are not like committed to shooting when the camera can't see the sun, which means at sunrise, sunset, and having buildings. Anyway, so the short answer, you're taking on a project, it's probably way safer to quote it and way more predictable on your time if you're shooting Matterport 360 views outside.
Absolutely. Yeah. Totally. When you're shooting 360s, it's going to be it's much easier on time, especially, and it can be highly frustrating whenever you maybe get 4, 5, 6 shots aligned using in 3D mode, and then you're halfway there, and then it goes, it just stops getting alignment, and you've wasted a lot of time getting to that point rather than just moving on and sticking with the 360s.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I can't overemphasize that on a project of this scale or scope. You must specify that outdoor shots are going to be done with a 360 view, not with a 3D scan. Otherwise, you're going to set yourself up for a fixed price agreement and pull out your hair, because it's going to take hours and hours or days longer than you had figured because of problems or challenges that you'll run into. Mark, I started to ask you about Mattertags, where we were looking at what kind of content. So far, I think we've seen you use Matterport Mattertags for video, for text, for Deeplinks.
Yeah.
Take us to a different place in an existing or different tour. How else were you using Matterport Mattertags within schools?
I'm trying to think what other, I mean, really just the standard, for them to describe what, basic descriptions of what children did in this area, or, labeling classrooms, because obviously you can label them using labels, but they're not as easy as putting a tag at the entrance to a classroom that says, "Welcome, this is P1 classroom you're now entering." I really can't think of any others. The school, obviously, the curriculum, the what do you call it, the book they provide.
Curriculum, that sounds good.
Yeah, and prospectus is the word I'm looking for.
Okay.
Prospectus. So they would have a magazine or informational booklet that they tend to have in a PDF. So you can always add that as well. So as much as, yeah, that's pretty much all I can
On
think
tags.
of right now.
Switching topics, I noticed the Matterport highlight reel within the school tour that you were showing us. Did you create the Matterport highlight reel, or was that created by the teachers or administrators?
We created the highlight reel and I create a highlight reel for every single tour I do. And I know that some people don't like it. I think it's very easy to do now with Matterport. I think it's much more useful than it used to be, because you can obviously let it choose which way it pans, and how far it is to pan. It pans, and I think it's a great way for schools or any property to let people have a guided tour of it. I can do it very fast. It's much easier to do if you scan it yourself. On several occasions, I had to scan the tour, or I had to create the highlight reel in 20 schools that I actually had never been in, because they were scanned by somebody else. So that can be difficult, because you need to try and create a flow around the building. But what we have done is we've shown the schools how they can remove by just clicking the bin, if there's certain rooms that they don't want included in the highlight reel. And on one occasion, one of the teachers went in and tagged a room and said, please, can you add this room to the highlight reel? And I went in and found the tag and added it to the highlight reel. But one thing I would say about schools is that, if I could get you, when you're adding to a highlight reel, obviously they all start to go along the bottom. So they're all along the bottom of your screen. But when you've added about 10, you'll know that they slide off the end along the screen. So you can only, when you're in a live tour, you can only see the first 8, maybe. So what I did was, we find that schools, outdoor space is very important to them. They want to show off their pitches, they want to show off their playgrounds, they want to show off their forest schools or whatever they want. But if you put them at the end, the viewer never finds them. So what we tend to do is put the external 360s at the start of the highlight reel, which means that they're always in view. Okay, so whenever someone hits play, it's the first bit they see is the outside space, and then we tend to go up into dollhouse view and then drop into the school and go off on a guided tour from there.
Yeah, really a great tip. So if you were doing a home for sale, you might do the tour in the order that you walk through the house. Yeah. But a school is so big and so massive, and you want to make sure that they actually see the outdoor space. Yeah. So you've kind of, let's put it at the beginning. So no matter when they start the tour, they'll always be able to jump to outside and see the most important features first. Yeah. Did you have any auditoriums in any of the schools?
I was thinking about that.
Theaters?
Not really, because they were all sort of smaller schools. We had all sorts of, there was a theater in that one I was showing you a second ago, but I lost it.
Have you shot a theater? Have you done a Matterport tour of a theater auditorium?
I have. I've done a huge auditorium in Belfast called the Waterfront Hall. I did that very early on.
Any tips to share? Problems of what you're experiencing in an auditorium, and then how to solve that?
Do you know what? I was really lucky in that auditorium, and I can honestly say that it was early on. We had the camera 6 months maybe, and there was times when I was looking at the iPad and I'm going, where am I on this map? Because it's all such the same. But yet the Matterport was putting it in the right place, and I it's so repetitive. I don't know whether it's the software updates or something that have happened over the last few years, but I think it's more tricky now than it was a few years ago. But they've improved other stuff. But I'm not sure what happened. But when it comes to auditorium, well, that auditorium in particular, I don't do every row of seats. I do every other row of seats, and I don't do it. I sort of do every fourth seat. So, and I try again to start and go around the walls. And then when you're going along, keep going in rows and rows. Don't jump. You can't jump about or your camera won't know where it is. So
Did you scan Backstage?
no, I didn't.
Because?
They didn't want it included. That was
Interesting.
really
I would suggest ask going forward, because it's kind of interesting to be able to say, and it's a Backstage.
Yes, it is.
A Backstage
Absolutely.
tour. I know in Atlanta, I've done that. And that was one of the appeals of the auditorium, is you just couldn't take thousands of people to go backstage, but you could within a Matterport tour. You could take them up top to the lighting platform and also into the back room with the spotlights and the people who were running the board. So that became something interesting. I don't know if that applies to schools, but it's probably at least worth asking the administrator, if you have an auditorium, do you want Backstage? Do you want the green rooms or dressing rooms? I guess that might depend on whether they rent out the school to other companies, or if they just need to make those spaces available to people that might be doing productions or something. I always think about, is there money involved? Because every time there's money involved, then that's a really good use for Matterport to get somebody to make a decision to spend money or spend more money. Were there other unusual spaces within schools that was it a science room? Was there something about a particular kind of classroom that had challenges?
What I did find, I'll share my screen, was that some of the schools, well, apart from this is a good example where we put in the bottom left, we put the outdoor shot. This was a huge old house which was converted into a school. So we put the first three shots are all the outdoor spaces, just 360 shots outside. Let's see if I can go by into the tour. So let me just get my bearings. Canteens are large parts of schools. So if we have a look, I'm pretty sure it's here. Yeah, here. So this is the canteen in this door. So what we do, instead of spending 20 minutes, this is a relatively small canteen, but a lot of canteens could have 200-300 seats. And people, when they're in a final tour, don't really want to walk around a canteen. There's nothing interesting about them, really. So what we tend to do is just do a 360 shot in the middle. And it saves us time. It saves the school money, because we charge, our company charges for square feet. So scan. So we find that if there's even gyms, if there's a gym that's gymnasium room that's empty and there's nothing in it, unless they specifically ask for it to be included, we just tend to do a 360 shot or a couple of 360 shots and then just add them to the door. So it's keeping the schools tours as interesting as possible and not think. But this is another good example of this was an alignment nightmare down along this corridor. Just the way it was glass, it was repetitive, but I managed to get alignment using that Cortex conversion, and then you'll see we whiz along it here because I got rid of a lot of the spots. But this gym, they had laid out the equipment and they'd gone to some effort, so we decided to scan the whole room, just because the thing. This was one of the first times I'd actually been in a soft play area with the camera. So in here, we have a huge soft play area within the school. I tried to go into the soft play area, but it became tricky to get the camera when I got to this point to give up, but it sort of gave people the idea. I didn't try to go up the stairs or I think I got up onto this, but I may have.
Was it because the stairs weren't flat to put?
These things. Yeah, I just didn't want although it was a soft player, I didn't want my camera going over in it. And again,
I look at that and I go, gee, I wonder, even if you knew that ahead of time, you know, if you were to bring a plank with you, but it doesn't look like it would actually fit anywhere, to bring
Yeah.
your own flat piece of wood to put someplace.
Yeah, yeah, it's just one of those ones where they wanted to let people know it was there. I sort of took it on as a challenge to try and get into it, but it soon sort of failed.
Yeah.
It could have
When
been
I
done,
went to
but I'd been
school,
better prepared.
when I went to school, I never had anything that looked like that. I mean,
No,
you know, that sounds like a great selling point in terms of engaging kids.
yeah, there was another smaller one up at this end, which had sort of swings and stuff.
That's amazing. So
Yeah.
I'm still looking for spaces in schools that are super hard to scan for some reason. So you gave us the example in that soft play area where you couldn't continue to go up the stairs because the stairs were
Yeah, soft.
soft, silly, whatever.
Yeah, but yeah,
You showed us
this
these
was quite a
corridors.
challenge because when you set the tripod on this floor, this was a very spongy floor. So when you put your foot down, the whole tripod tipped over. So you had to sort of tiptoe over to get it and get it to get the scan.
If you were going to scan that again, would you bring a plank that was just a square that was, or circle that was?
yeah, something that the three legs of the tripod would sit on would definitely have been a help.
Did
Definitely.
you use
yeah.
a trolley at all on your hallways to scan?
I haven't. I tried a trolley a few years ago and it just didn't work for me at all.
Right.
I know there are some people out there who use them, but I just, a lot of the classrooms you'll find, these aren't good examples, but the rows of seats are very close together. So you have to, these are all, because again of COVID, desks have been moved apart, but
Yeah.
sometimes it can be very tight down the middle of desks.
Oh, I was just thinking of your long hallways.
Yeah. Oh, well, a long hallway, sure. Yeah, you could well use if you had it there, then you could use it, certainly, yeah.
Did you do all the hallways at once and then came back, or did you do the hallway and the classroom, the hallway, the classroom, the hallway, the classroom?
I did hallway, classroom. There was, I'm trying to think, more whenever there was, if there was staircases, that's what it was. Alignment. Sometimes if you've got a really long building, that's like, for example, this one, and you've got 2 floors. This one's a single story. There's no upstairs in this. But if you've got 2 floors and you scan up the stairs to the top floor here, and then you go all the way along to the other end, and then you scan up, by the time you meet on the 2nd floor, you tend to get a misalignment. And so what I tend to do the corridors and go up and come across and try and get alignment early on before there's too much data, and then I'll go off into each classroom after that, if that makes sense. If any of you have scanned a huge building, you'll know what I mean. You get to one end of it and you've got a quite a big misalignment because the camera's slightly off or one of your shots is slightly off. So I tend to do the long corridors up the stairs along the corridor and then go back to add the classrooms after that. But that's only on really big ones. I mean, it just depends on the school size. But yeah, I think a few bits of advice for people who are scanning schools is make sure you've got a Matterport Pro or 2 Pro lights, because you're going to be there for more than 4 hours. You're going to be there, well, for any size of school. Make sure you've got a really good iPad. I mean, we have the latest iPad Pros. We both had iPad Pros. We both had Pro 2 cameras, and we were flattening the battery on both of them. You know, you can get a full...
The battery on the iPad or the battery on the camera?
Both every day.
So were you on the iPads, were you charged into a portable battery pack in your pockets?
We had them and we used them, but it tended to be towards the end of the day. The new Pro, can't remember the model we have, but it's the latest iPad Pro has a very good battery, and you probably get 6.5, 7 hours. So, but if you're going to be on an 8-9 hour shoot, you have to have a 10,000 whatever it is milliamp battery pack. which comes in handy as well if you're.
And they're not expensive, so you just
No.
pop it in your pocket, you put the cord into the iPad, and while you're shooting, you're charging.
Yeah, you just have to be careful that that cord running from the battery pack to your iPad doesn't catch your tripod and pull it over, which I've nearly done several times.
Yes, in fact, it's one of the few times that I'd actually recommend a short cord,
Yeah.
so that you're not tempted to have
Yeah.
a cord catch on something. On the Matterport Pro 2 3D camera, help me out. What was your longest scan day? Was
We
9 to 5. That would be 8 hours.
Well, we can only do 8 hours because the camera's going to. We can only go as far as the camera, and I have had shot days where I have literally been seconds away from the camera turning off doing my last shot. And so, yeah, pretty much we scanned the battery's flat. You know.
So it sounds like you didn't take any lunch break.
No, not. You can't really, if you're going into a big school like that and you've got a day to do it, you can't afford to really stop on it. I know it sounds crazy, but if you're up against time and the school's closed for the weekend, most caretakers or principals don't want to give up a Sunday. So you've got a Saturday, and they'll be there at 9 and they don't want to work too late, and your camera won't go more than 8 hours. So you've got one day, you go prepared, you have a big breakfast before you go, take snacks, water, and look forward to a big dinner when you're finished.
Interesting, because I would have expected you to take a lunch break just so you could charge your camera for an hour, but you're not alone. There's somebody that's always with you, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And they may be stopping for lunch or something, but you got to keep going to get out of there as quick as possible so that you're not tying them up an hour more than they did. You find that it was a little bit of a challenge where your client that's on site is perhaps not so happy that their whole day is 9 to 5 of
Yeah, well, in most schools we give them the option. Some schools paid their staff member to be there for the day. Sometimes, well, a lot of the time, we would say, look, we're going to be here all day. There's no need for you to be here. If you want, you can lock us in. I mean, there's emergency exit if we need to get out.
Yeah.
Just leave us, give us your number, and we'll call you half an hour before we finish. Which suited us better because no matter, even if there's one person in a 30,000 square foot school, you can be guaranteed they're going to walk into the shot at least once. And in fact, on one point, I had 10 teachers in the school and some children. And I just learned a trick I learned which quite a long time ago is that the camera turns clockwise. So if you're looking, if they're outside, for example, point your camera to the left of the window. And whenever its first few turns, you stand behind it and you can see. And if no one's walked into it, you let the camera turn on round. But if you start it to the right of the window, it's almost done a full turn, and then it goes and hits the window with someone outside. You have to start the whole thing again. So, or if it's a doorway, shoot the doorway first, because then if someone walks past it when the camera's got its back to it, then there's not a problem. You know, so you're not having to redo the one shot over and over again.
been there. I feel your pain and the technique to avoid having to restart the scan.
Yeah.
Because you knew if they were going to be in your shot, that's where they were going to be. So you're going to kind of get that scanned first, and then you're good.
Dry.
Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing is anticipate that you're going to have somebody with you the entire day. But if you're lucky enough, you can kind of convince them to say, come, walk around, put the door stoppers in each of the doors that you want open for us to do the Matterport scan. To stage, this is the order that you're going to proceed. So please stage the space in the following pattern, or ideally what you're hoping is that everybody read the instructions, they're on the same page, they've They've laid out their rocket ships and all kinds of
Yeah.
other props and whatever is appropriate in their room to make it perfect, just as if it was an open house for parents and students. But knowing that that doesn't always happen, is to have the person that's with you stage in a particular order. And at that point, you should know, I know already to scan all the rooms that the doors are open, and I know that the person is staged all the spaces ahead of me. Therefore, if they're okay and everybody else is okay, let them go, give me a phone number, and everybody's happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, that's cool. You mentioned on these long days, no meal breaks. It sounds like you did bring water with you and snacks, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so,
Tend to be water and like sort of nuts or something like that, or something that can be eaten while you're scanning.
yeah, for the most part, are you walking around the camera, or are you going around a corner?
Schools, there are quite a lot of I don't like being in reflections, and I try to avoid being in the shot at all. And schools have got most classrooms are going to have a big screen. And you used to be where the blackboard used to be is now a smart screen. So you're going to get a reflection in that. You're going to get a reflection in the windows, and a lot of them have windows. So I tend to leave the room if I can. And classrooms mostly aren't that big, so you can get out of them. But if you can't, and as well as that, you've got desks, and there's quite a lot of time you're doing that, stepping over corners of desks, avoiding the tripod. So a bit of both, but if you can, as long as you're not in the shot or in the reflections, I think another tip would be to turn the smart screen on, because there's a one button on and it comes up with a home screen, and that reduces the reflection. Because if it's totally black, if your smart screen is black, you can see the reflection much better than if it's on and there's a bit of backlight coming from it. So yeah, there is a bit of trick in avoiding the camera, I suppose.
Okay. You mentioned some long days. You got any special shoe requirements or recommendations or tips?
Yeah, well, I suppose everybody's different. I know my business partner, he bought a pair, especially for a pair of New Balance shoes. I have a pair of Nike Air high top baseball boots that I've had for about 6 years, and although they squeak a bit on the corridors and stuff, they are the most comfortable shoes. And I'd taken about 2 or 3 different pairs of shoes in case one wasn't working, and I ended up wearing the same pair for 17 days. So yeah, definitely find the pair of shoes that you're most comfortable in, especially in schools where they're solid floors. It's not like a house where you're on nice soft carpet. There tend to be tiled, wooden, solid floors.
Yeah, in the United States, I personally would recommend the Walking Company shoes.
Okay.
When I got the pitch, it was, you'll feel like you're walking on pillows, and yes, you do. And I can get done scanning for 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, and my feet are perfectly comfortable. And the interesting thing is, the reason is they make a 3-dimensional model of your foot. They do a scan and then determine what kind of wedge is best for your foot.
Wow.
So anyway, Walking Company, probably in every mall in the United States. Mark, I know we've been talking about like an hour and a half, and like every second you have a new tip, a new problem, a new challenge. I know I could probably ask you for hours here. It's probably 11:30 at night where you are near Belfast. We probably should wrap up. But I should give you an open-ended question to say, gee, what haven't we covered in terms of problems that came up and how you solved them?
I think we've covered most stuff. I think the outdoor spaces are a challenge because schools want to include them, but don't try and bang your head against the brick wall trying to walk your camera outside. Just get several good 360 shots and tie them to it. And if there's a building that's further away, unless you've got a BLK 360 at hand, if there are separate buildings, settle the fact that you're going to need to do 2 separate scans for those buildings and then just link them together. Again, if you've got a covered walkway, you might have a bit of luck, but it was very frustrating when schools want one tour of the whole place and it's not possible. You know, with the technology that we have in your hand. But yeah, and yeah, we've covered everything. Other than that, we've done the marketing, I suppose, was the big thing at the start that really got us moving, and the targeted adverts on Facebook towards principals of schools.
This has been awesome. I think if I tried to count how many tips, there must be at least 100. It's really quite remarkable of how many different problems or challenges and how you and your team at 3D Showcase solved problems, challenges to offer tips that will make it the community be able to succeed faster. So thank you, Mark, for being on the show today.
You're very welcome, Dan. Thanks for having me.
We've been, you bet. We've been visiting with Mark McBride. Mark is the sales director for 3D Showcase, based in Belfast, Ireland. Their company website is 3DSHOWCASE. Gee, I hope I spelled that right. I'm a little slap happy. 3DSHOWCASE.co.uk. You can find Mark in the We Get Around Network forum at 3DSHOWCASE UK at 3D Showcase UK. Mark, awesome show. How about a little bit of thumbs up here? We'll get a little thumbnail for our. We got to do it at the same time as smile. I can't see your thumbs. Back, bring. Oh, back. Good. We got a thumbnail for our show. For Mark McBride in Belfast, Ireland, I'm Dan Smigrod, founder of the We Get Around Network forum, and you've been watching WGAN-TV live at 5.